Welcome you today to the Spiritual Engagement Hour at the Metropolitan Community Church of Washington, D.C. If it's your first time with us today, I welcome you. My name is Dwayne Johnson, and I'm the senior pastor of MCCDC. My email is revdwayne@mccdc.com. I also bring you greetings today from our associate pastor, who is here on site ministering and loving. Her name is Reverend Kathy Alexander, and you may reach her at Rev Kathy with a C at mccdc.com. Rev Kathy at mccdc.com. I invite us today to take a moment just to be present. Today, I light this candle to remind us of God's always present love in the presence of the Holy Spirit. Take a moment to just notice what you're feeling, body is feeling. Ask yourself, what do I need? What do I need from this time? And what steps do I need to take to get my needs fulfilled? We're called to offer support in the midst of these difficult and painful. Countless people are impacted by unjust executive and continual threats. We seek in the midst of this to be a voice for equality and justice. We also seek to care for others and also for ourselves. We support each other and our communities during these times. Just breathe that praise, that presence, that praise. We praise you, O God. Guide us and lead us now, and may this conversation with your love through the words of our mouth and the contemplations of our hearts. Amen. I offered 4 questions to begin this time, and I invite us to talk about those today and to see how these questions could be helpful, or your thoughts. What am I feeling? What is my body feeling? What do I need today? And what steps do I need to take to get my needs fulfilled? And we'll juxtapose that today with a psalm, which is a psalm for our souls, and some call it a psalm for refuge. It's written in the first person, and I'll leave it in the first person. And this is from the Psalter, a faithful and inclusive rendering. Lord, you are my shelter. Do not fail me. You always do right. Liberate me, rescue me, hear me, and save me. Be my rock and haven, to whom I can always turn. Be my tower of strength. Keep me safe. The ruthless and wicked trap me. Reach out to free me. You are my hope, O Lord, from the days of my youth. I have relied on you since birth, my strength from my mother's womb. I will praise you always. And that's Psalm 71, 1-6. Again, we welcome those of you online as well as those on site and later those on demand. One encouragement could be if you have a Bible nearby on your phone, on your device, or an actual Bible nearby, to perhaps look at a different translation of Psalm 71, 1-6, as part of our conversation today. And so in this opening, we've offered a number of entry points. There's the 4 questions, perhaps reflect if there's other questions in addition to these that we could be called to ask. Are these helpful? You may want to respond to the question if you wish. And Psalm 71. So there's quite a few things that have been offered, and we'll just open by seeing what's initially coming up for you today. What struck you from those questions, or perhaps from that psalm? What's coming up for you today?
This is just very important to recognize and acknowledge what you're feeling, what we're feeling, and not to ignore it or stuff it down, because then that causes stress. It can cause trauma. So it's just best to try to tap into it and find out how you're feeling in order to be able to release it.
Yes, so the importance of acknowledging our feelings, especially during this time in which
Yes.
we live. Yes, and welcome. You're welcome to come and join us closer if you wish, or if you wish to remain. I just wanted to say thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
So it's important right now to acknowledge feelings during this time when it seems that people's feelings are being trampled on. People's very value and dignity is being ignored. That's probably too weak a word. Well, acknowledgement in itself. And one of the things about the Psalms is that the Psalms really offer the entire range of feelings. They're very honest. They don't gloss over what's real.
I am struck in this psalm that it starts off by saying it starts off talking about shame, and what came up for me is um, not being ashamed to need and seek refuge, because there's so much about what it means to reach out, or what strength is or what strength is not. And so I was associating seeking refuge and asking for refuge and needing refuge as not shameful, but actually being in community and having that, and the prayer that I accept that about myself, rather than that is a sign of weakness in some kind of way. And I was having a conversation recently with somebody else about that as well. So that's what came up for me right here at the beginning, that it begins with shame. And there are all kinds of reasons I think it begins with shame, but that's what came up around that for me.
Yeah. You're absolutely worthy of rest, refuge, shelter, and that is one of those things that's countercultural. That's one of those things that is seeking shelter is an act of resistance with what we're seeing around us right now, which is really real, which is why we need this conversation and this support. That we are absolutely worthy of having our needs met, which again builds the basis to help support the needs of others. So it's not a selfish thing to say, I need some space. Welcome again, those online. Glad you're with us today. And feel free, if you wish, to put notes in the chat box. We have our tech support, Canute, who's also spiritual support, but he's watching the chat box and can read your messages out for us today. But we're so glad that you're with us. Someone have a different translation of Psalm 71, 1 through 6 that they would like to read into the space today?
I have the New Living Translation.
New Living Translation, verses 1 through 6.
O Lord, I have come to you for protection. Don't let me be disgraced. Save me and rescue me, for you do what is right. Turn your ear to listen to me and set me free. Be my rock of safety where I can always hide. Give the order to save me, for you are my rock and my fortress. My God, rescue me from the power of the wicked, from the clutches of cruel oppressors. O Lord, you alone are my hope. I have trusted you, O Lord, from childhood. Yes, you have been with me from birth. From my mother's womb, you have cared for me. No wonder I am always praising you.
Thank you. Anything that's come up from that slightly different rendering of Psalm 71, 1 through 6?
Good morning, everybody. It's good to see everyone here. Thank you for,
Welcome.
yeah, thanks for the reading, Joanne. I love to be read to. The thing that came up for me is what I love about the Psalms is that it's a singer-songwriter. It's a creative process. And not just the different translations, but the idea that you have a personal relationship and you could just wing it. You know? This whole idea of being a singer-songwriter in relationship is so moving. I mean, I know that the God of my understanding already knows all the wicked details of what's going on. But I can sing out or I can cry out in a way that matches how I'm feeling at that moment. And the other thing that occurred to me early this morning in my prayer time and yesterday is that two people can be in the same situation, experiencing the same thing, and have a totally different reaction. And their co-creation, their cry, their prayer, their psalm that they're singing could be different, and they're experiencing the same thing. And I really love that, that we can individualize our cry and we can individualize our response, and it's all good. So I like hearing two different versions. And I also like that people are coming from a different place. And most of the time, you have no clue what that person is going through, not even a clue. And you don't have to know to be kind and compassionate.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah,
Good to see everybody on Groundhog Day, if you feel like you've been here before.
thank you.
See you as well.
See you. And give our best to Big Mama and Veronica. Yeah. So we're talking about self-care, and it seems to me that there's a distinction between self-care and self-focus. And that part of the invitation is indeed to practice self-care, knowing that that's going to support us in how we are able to care for others. We'll be coming from a place of abundance and a place of fullness rather than a place of depletion. And at the same time, to be curious about how that can turn to self-focus. One thing that I've noticed with what's going on right now, that there is so much conversation about what's happening in the United States, and that's an important conversation. There is anger among the feelings, sadness, grief. And I think one of the things to be aware of is the risk of becoming overly self-focused or overly US-centric because it's happening here. So a practice that I've been mindful of is intentionality around reading spiritual writers from other countries, even in their current context. I was doing some reading this week of a writer from India, and you have the writers of Gaza and Palestine and the Ukraine. And I find it helpful to be in solidarity with other people around the globe as part of this process of not only caring for self and moving beyond self-focus, but also caring for others beyond our borders. And there's, of course, a lot of talk about the borders. This is a way of, in a sense, moving beyond the borders. So that's something I've been thinking about, especially this week. I see, Knut, that we have a note in the chat box.
Yeah, I'm happy to read it for Stephanie, who has put it in the chat. If you're okay, Stephanie, for me reading your words. Stephanie said, for me, what has come up is an affirmation from spirit. Since the things that have been going on, this has been my cry to God. This being the selection I feel is God telling me He has heard me and He is with me.
Affirmation from spirit. Listening for that voice. The God who comes to us in these places. And I like the intentionality that I perceive in what you've written. So thank you. Thank you so much. Intentionality. Questions that are being prompted in you, other thoughts?
I think also being mindful of what you take in. Because it's easy to take in what we read and hear and think that, or assume that it's the truth. And so it's, and sometimes it ends up that maybe what you share, a posting or something that you share, that someone else posted that you're sharing, it may not end up being true. But it sounds very real, that it's the truth, but as they say, not everything we read on social media is true. So, so it's easy to get caught up in that, and then that just spreads more misinformation. And so I think just being aware of what we take in,
Yeah.
how much we take in, because sometimes then we get overloaded because we get stuck on what we're seeing and hearing, and it is hard to turn away from it because or from getting engaged in, conversation and back and forth, on certain issues, especially if it's something, we don't agree with something that someone has said. So just being mindful of what we hear, what we read, and how much we read and how much we read, and then really realizing that you have to take it with a grain of salt, and not assume that everything that you are hearing is the truth, so that we don't get ourselves spun up
Yeah.
over things
Yeah.
unnecessarily, because it may not be true.
Thank you.
Back to I sometimes have a delayed reaction. I wanted to speak to the whole idea about self-focus. And I learned this week, kind of, I don't want to say a tough love lesson, but learning to say no, or learning to say, I need to take care of myself. I often used to come from a place of feeling, oh, that's being selfish. The other person needs more than I need. And I had an experience this week. For those of you that are new, it's not always a confession booth here, but I'm confessing. Um, a person called me that I'm very close to. We talk frequently, but they called twice and I didn't answer. Once because I was sleepy and um, could have answered, but was not like all there. And I would argue taking a nap or sleeping is important. And then the other time I was doing something else. And so then when I finally um, talked to him, he was calling like kind of really in an urgent place. And he had been preparing for his mother-in-law to pass. And he was calling to tell me, he was having a really hard time and that his mother-in-law passed. And I was just overwhelmed with feeling so shitty. Like, oh my God, why didn't I answer the phone? And, I was being selfish and la di da di da. And I mean, it was horrible. It was a horrible experience of not just feeling not good enough, but feeling like I am supposed to be there when I'm called. And like that's part of my spiritual walk. And then, after I settled down and, he and I got to talk, I was like, God's got this. God was with him. God was with his mother-in-law. I had done everything. I was prayed up, he was prayed up. This idea that we are the only ones that can fill a need, it's just, for me, stupid. It's just stupid. And that not caring for not so much yourself, but you're kind of telling everybody that I am the only one that can do it. And I think one of the things that we've been really looking at in spiritual community is who is the best person? What stuff can you put on the altar and just say, okay, I'm going to put it aside and all is well. And the fact that I have the kind of relationship with this person, I could say, oh, I feel terrible. I wasn't able to answer when you called. And he was able to say to me, it wasn't like a forgiveness thing, but he was like, it's okay for me to call and you not answer. We have a relationship that goes way back and we can do this flow thing. And I think that speaks to how you relate to the God of your understanding. You're not always going to measure up. You're going to make decisions that maybe you might regret momentarily. But one of the elders in my life has said to me, do you think God doesn't have this? That God wasn't there? That it unfolded exactly as it should? So I wanted to share that. I'm not always like settled with it. And I do feel bad and guilty that I wasn't available. But I also feel much better that I have a place that I can talk about that. I have my confession booth, and I can also speak to the fact that what I was doing at that time was something that I could only do, not just for myself, but asking yourself, what is my part? What is my business to mind? And um, back to the extraordinary sadness and grief that he was going through and his desire to be comforted. He was able to say, this is what I did to comfort myself. What are you going to do to comfort yourself? And that's the kind of dialogue that I think is so helpful. It's just a helpful process, whether it's, you mean a third plane went down? Are you freaking kidding me? Are blah, 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 blah. What happened? I mean, you can mount up and you can be on overwhelm, but if you don't have a place for sanctuary and safety, you're not going to be able to really be in touch with what are the supports that you need, whether it's sleep or eating on time or walking the dog, whatever it is that you need, you're gonna be so detached from that because you believe that you're the only source, and you're not the only source. There's a greater source that we all can engage in. So I wanted to confess, but I also wanted to say that, um, new mercies every day.
Yes.
Start over.
Jackie, that reminds me of what my brother used to say from the pulpit. Who died and made you God, Junior?
Thank you.
Right.
Good to hear your voice, Cappy.
Yeah, that's all you're gonna hear, because
Yeah.
in I'm not in video.
Sure. That's all right. It's good to hear your voice, and a shout out to Penny also.
Thank you.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing, so thank you. Others stuff coming up. Thank you in the chat box. Can't fill an empty, you can't fill from an empty cup. Yeah? Yeah?
It's so much of what, in these times, I think so much of what prayer and contemplation and relationship with God and the ancestors offers for me is that ongoing being able to check in about these things, about where are the places I need to move away from things, and where are the places that I do engage things, and being able to constantly check in. Because as it's about a resource for that, because there is so much. I've been thinking a lot about what it means to witness and be involved in and try to resist, what it means to do that, and what it does mean to rest, and what it means to disengage and not overload. But in particular, this thing about witnessing and not overloading, witnessing and not overloading, because I come from a place where witnessing is important, not leaving people alone to experience violation and violence, even when it can't be stopped in the moment. And so there is this tug and pull around that, and because of what technology now allows, that's different than what it was. I'm old, so it's different than what it was, that was about being present on site. And so this tug and pull around what does it mean to bear witness in that particular kind of way, and at the same time to not overload. So that's an ongoing question. And then how does that impact being sure that I'm involved in resisting? So that's prayer and contemplation is important. And sometimes that's just for a moment. It's like, speaking of old expressions, that's the H&J help me Jesus moment sometimes. It's just like, what now? So that there's a lot of that right now. Yeah.
I don't know what the crux of this conversation was, so I didn't get in on the beginning. But I had a conversation with my non-binary group on Friday. Oh, I don't know what day it is. But I had a conversation, and people were the transgender population in the group was really distraught. And as they were talking, I just recalled, well, I can understand you being distraught because so many things are supposed to happen to the transgender population. And I recall what I saw back in civil rights era, where I was watching the television as a child and seeing people getting bitten by dogs and water hosed and all this other stuff. And it was like a new thing to them, sort of, but it's something that I felt that I'd already lived through. Um, but a lot of the people today that are affected were not affected by what was happening in Selma, Alabama, was not affected by Emmett Till, um, or may not even have any knowledge of it. So I had to wrap my head around what they were feeling and kind of let them know that been there, done that. You know, I had a conversation the other night with my niece, and she was going on and on and on, Joanna, what you were talking about, the news. Oh, did you hear this? And did you hear that? And I got so fed up with it. I said, and what are you doing? Because all these people that are complaining and not being activists, they need to, I was saying to her, they need to just shut up. Just talking and complaining isn't going to make a difference. What activist group are you attached to? What are you doing? Where are you spending your money? So it's like there's so many different levels of what's happening in history today that I can focus on activism, doing what I think my part is, but not just sitting and complaining.
Thank you, Kathy.
Well, I
And
wasn't in the
sorry,
I'm sorry.
sorry to interrupt you, Jackie. I think Stephanie had her hand raised. She's so polite. Stephanie, just feel free to come in and talk and join us in conversation.
Sure.
Yeah, Stephanie, and then back to Jackie Lewis. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I just don't like to cut off people's train of thought. Um, but I wanted to touch on what Kathy was talking about with the our community, the LGBTQ plus, being directly impacted and attacked. And it kind of last night when I was praying and in worship, when I look at Psalm 71 verse 3 is deliver, be my rock of refuge to which I can always go. Give the command to save me, for you are my rock and my fortress. And last night when I was praying in worship, I started hearing who God is, and God is the God of kindness. He's the God of peace. He's the God of grace. He's the God of relief, and He's the God of the least of these. And when people are marginalized and attacked, we become the least of these in a lot of people's eyes. And I think we just have to keep that mantra of who God is, and that. But also, I was looking while Kathy was talking, and some verses were put on my heart. And these are all NIV, but Ezekiel 36:26 says, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you the heart of flesh. And that's kind of what I've been praying over us all, is remove this heart of stone where they would put in terrible executive orders that really are harmful. Even in my work, they've directed us to do some hurtful things, which certain languages that are inclusive, and fight for equality and justice for all. So I think basically what I'm saying is while we go through these, just remember who our God is. And He's the God of kindness, of peace, of love, of grace, and He's the God of the least of these. So while we walk every day, just remember our God fights for us.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, Jackie, you're welcome to come back in.
Back in, Jeff. Yeah.
Of course, I'm struck speechless now. I just wanted to ditto everything that I've heard, and Cappy and I, even like I said, even though we've never met in person, it seems like we're always in the same spaces together. And I was in a similar conversation, and what Stephanie was saying about her spot. One of the things that went differently for me, though I was in the same situation, was not only was there this well of compassion, kindness, and shut the fuck up at the same time. I can't listen to this. What happened for me was I realized that the person that was talking had no idea who I was or what I had been through, and that I didn't need to tell them what to do. But what I did realize deeply in that moment was if I was feeling um, open heart, vulnerable, or able, which I can't do if I don't take care of myself. If I don't eat this pancake and talk to y'all, like I burnt 2 pancakes because I was trying to be two places at once. I wanted to be able to say, oh my God, that must feel terrible. And this is what I've done when I've been in that situation. And I was able to share in the conversation that happened with me. I started my usual rant, young people are dead, la, la, la. I was just like, ooh, like I heard myself and I was outraged that who's that speaking? Well, that's me speaking. But I was able to say, what helped me through difficult times was to find someone in history, an ancestor who had already been through that, and to find their words, find what did they do when their brother got burnt up or lynched or they were attacked or whatever. And I talked about how much I, as a lover of history and books, found comfort in reading in history. And that even though most people like to watch TV or, like the condensed version, I found solace and comfort in reading people's journals about how they got over, how they went, how they got on. And my granddaughter, who's 5, who's really funny, she says to other people now, you should sing a Negro spiritual, or you should try this. And I think that when I think about that, I realize some of those people, I think they know about Emmett Till. I think they know this, or I'm angry that they don't, their hearts are not expanded to realize that other people have been in that situation. But that if I can be vulnerable enough to say this, I'm 71, and when this happened to me, or I got fired from my job, or I got whatever. I mean, it doesn't require a lot of detail. But if I was able in that moment, if I'm able to share what got me through, I think we're leaving breadcrumbs for people, because you don't know, well, how did Carter G. Woodson get through this? How did it happen when the coal mines closed? Or how did it happen that I came out and I lost custody of my kids? I don't have to focus on the injury, but if I can focus on what sustained me. I really loved the experience of hearing someone else's story, not that they perfected it, but that they went through a similar thing and what was open to them, and how you can choose is the wrong word, how there is an option for radical love, radical whatever. There's also hit him in the head, get a gun. Uh, there's lots of options, but where are the places where you can experience that and see what happened to people? So that's why I love y'all, and I just love this conversation, and I love the fact that if we don't do the inner work, we're not going to be able to be available to anybody else. Uh,
Thank you so much, Jackie Lois. Kathy, I saw your hand raised, and then after Kathy, we'll move to our sending forth.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Stephanie. One of my overarching prayers is that love conquers all.
Yes.
And also that I think that the administration that's spewing the hate and the evil and the discord, I think it's going to implode on itself. I think it's going to ruin itself. So that's all I wanted to say. But yeah, Stephanie, love conquers all.
All right, well, thanks to everyone so much. And Psalm 70, there's another chat, Psalm 70 declares that. So thank you again, Stephanie. Prayers are with you in your workplace. How good it is to be connected on site as well as online. And thank you so much for those here for the first time. We always have these robust conversations. We always learn so much from each other, and we're thankful for that. And so we invite you to go from this place today, knowing that you are loved and beloved, and also that you have gifts that God has given you for you to share that are uniquely yours, that can meet the needs of the world. Know that you do have something the world needs, and indeed share it. And we'll gather again at the same time next week for spiritual engagement conversation. And then today, we also invite you to join us on site or online or on demand for our 10:30 a.m. service, where we're going to be talking about meeting the needs of these times. In a sense, this conversation will continue in parts of our worship today. Take good care.